Works of the law. In sections 2 and 3, we shifted from our study of circumcision and began to dig into the social-religious background of Paul's famous phrase, works of the law. What we learned, especially from Qumran's 4Q MMT document, as well as from the surviving rabbinic literature, is that works of the law is not merely a description of works, the way the church describes it, merit theology. What sha'ul is really talking about when he employs the Greek phrase ergo namu, translated as deeds/works of the law, is in actuality a technical phrase that the Judaisms of Paul's day employed to speak of the socio-religious and ethnic boundary markers that separated Jews from Gentiles. I might also add that they undergirded covenant membership and group sectarianism among Jews. So it seems that works of law had carried two functions. It was some type of boundary-defining law or rule or perspective or ideal or concept, and when it cut boundaries between two concepts, sometimes the boundary was between Jew and Gentile in the broader perspective, but sometimes in a smaller, limited perspective or scope, then it was a boundary between Jew and Jew. So it just separated groups, kind of the way group policies or church policies separate groups from groups today. Kind of, denominational boundaries, things like that. So let's keep reading. Indeed, the prevailing view of the sages of the first century held to the common belief that Jewish Israel and Jewish Israel alone shared a place in the world to come. And this phrase, all Israel shares a place in the world to come, that's lifted directly from the Mishnah Tractate Sanhedrin 10:1. Which is essentially, it forms a kind of a maxim in Judaism in Paul's day. And this phrase, all Israel shares a place in the world to come, it formed the basis, part of the basis behind the idea that it's Jews and only Jews who are saved, because that phrase world to come refers to the age that you inherit after you die. In other words, what Christians would call heaven. And we all know from Christian theology that you don't get into heaven unless you're saved. So essentially the Jewish people were believing that because we're Jewish Israel, we're going to make it into heaven. And that quote itself references Isaiah 60 verse 21. And we looked at that actually last week when we talked about, was it last week? It was the week before, where we were in the section on Shomer Mitzvot, Torah observance. So let's keep reading. Thus, in their way of thinking, speaking of the first century Jews, in their way of thinking, if a non-Jew, read here as a Gentile, wished to enter into Hashem's covenant blessings and promises, such a person had to convert to Judaism first, right? They had to take on legal Jewish status, which then granted covenant membership. See how that worked? It was the recognition of the ethnicity that leveraged covenant membership in the eyes of the Jewish people. And once that took place, once that was out of the way, once a Gentile became a Jew, watch this, then and only then could that new Jew exercise, quote, maintenance, end quote, of existing covenant membership by ongoing loyalty and obedience to the Torah. See how that works? In essence, it was that group membership was maintained by keeping the Torah. It wasn't attained by keeping the Torah. See how that is a huge difference, the way I just described it. It's a huge difference from the way the historic Christian church formulates the problem and the solution. Remember what I said earlier? The historic Christian church believes that the problem was that people in the first century, Jews and Gentiles, were trying to keep Torah to become saved, and therefore the solution in their eyes, the solution in the eyes of the historic Christianities of today, is that we need to take Torah out of the picture, because that's the problem clouding your eyes. That's the thing that's tripping you up, trying to, fooling you into believe thinking that you can keep it to be saved. Because that's the problem. If we take that out of the picture and instead insert Jesus into the equation, then Jesus becomes the solution, but it's only Jesus minus the Torah that becomes the solution. See how that works? It's because the historic Christianities of today believed that the people in the first century were wielding Torah to become covenant members. that they take Torah out of the picture as part of their solution. But I don't think that's the best way. That doesn't seem to be a best practices way of reading through Paul's writings. Instead, if we see it as the Torah was not the means of becoming a covenant member, rather the Torah was given to existing covenant members, then essentially we don't find that the Torah needs to be taken out of the picture as part of the solution. To be sure, as I say in my commentary, this concept of covenant membership driven by ethnicity and Torah obedience functioning as kind of maintenance or what do we say? Not just maintenance, but helping to segregate groups against groups. This concept is actually one of the primary arguments delineated in the letter to the Galatians, as we're going to see here. So keep following along with me, and I think you'll see this played out.